What's up, Chris? How's it going?
Very well, Joe. How you doing?
Fantastic. Really good. Yeah. So I went for a nice walk this morning in lovely Salt Lake City. I hope it stays this way year round, but it won't. So anyway, how's
Yeah,
your
we've
day?
got the sun shining like for the 2 or 3 days we get a year in England at the moment, so that's nice.
Oh, what do people do when the sun's out then?
Usually complain that it's too hot,
Okay.
and then as soon as it starts raining again, we complain about that.
Okay. I see how it is.
Oh, I know.
They're very exuberant culture. Awesome.
Yeah, we play it closer to the chest, perhaps, than your side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, definitely. Like my wife's out, we're going out for a walk this morning, and she's like, "It's so beautiful out here." And I think she proceeded to say that like 24 times in the course of a 20-minute walk. So, yeah. So, yeah. If you want to take her to England, she'll become a bit more reserved, just complain about everything. So it's too green here.
Give her 6 months in the north, and she'll change her ways.
Deal. Awesome. So, yeah, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Okay, I'm Kris Jenkins. I've been programming since I was a kid. My life has always been in software, both out of interest and professionally. Um, I've done a few interesting things in my career. I've co-founded a company,
Oh,
which was actually successful, which makes it all
congrats.
the more noteworthy. Thank you. I've been a developer advocate. I've been a functional programming contractor with far more work than I ever expected to get in that space. Um, for a while, I was exclusively doing front end development in ClojureScript, which is the version of Clojure that compiles to JavaScript.
Okay.
And I was busy. I was genuinely busy on that gig. And these days, I am flipping the other side of the table. I'm a podcast host. It's
Yeah,
my
yeah, I
main
remember
jam.
that. Yeah, I've been on your podcast,
Yeah.
so, and you're really good at it too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think. But you've been doing podcasting for a while, right?
Yeah. I did it for the company I was a developer advocate for last for approximately 70 episodes, I want to say.
Mm,
So,
that's a
you
good number.
you get into a rhythm after that
Yeah,
many.
you figure it out. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting having other podcasters on your podcast because I don't know, it's just a different dynamic, right? Because you're both used to asking questions, being the host, and then you gotta also play the role of the guest. And um,
Yeah. The thing I
yeah,
find slightly strange is I think it's really important, personally, the way I do podcasting, to shut up and listen to the guest, right? And I'm going to have to remember for the next hour or so to actually talk.
we
I
could just
mustn't
have
slip into
a
interviewing you.
silent. Yeah, we could just have like 50 minutes of silence, and I guess we can just do that. So I'll just politely listen to you listen. So
Yeah, we can call it an avant-garde post podcast. like,
I always wondered, like with silent meditation, for example,
hmm,
right? I guess some friends that do that, they go for 10 days and they don't talk or anything. And one of my friends, he said that he did that. And you got to remember, this guy is like the loudest New Yorker stereotype you'll ever meet. I'm like, you can't spend 10 seconds being quiet. How are you going to do 10 days? This is the weirdest thing.
uh,
So, but maybe there's a silent podcast opportunity out there. We could just stare at stare at each other and,
yeah,
longingly stay silent. I don't know. Be funny.
we could sell CDs of it afterwards, and that kind of thing.
It'd be funny if you sold physical CDs too.
Yeah.
That'd be even more avant-garde. So, well, cool. Yeah. Actually, the you touched on something really fascinating. I want to get back to, which was being a functional programming contractor. Like
Yeah.
that's quite the niche. And then you're doing ClojureScript, which is super niche, but surprisingly, you're very very busy as well. How did that happen?
Um, Kind of by accident. So I was doing Java for about 10 years in the startup I had. Um, and I got to the end of that, and for various reasons, I was kind of exhausted, all right, as you can imagine. But particularly programming wise, I was kind of exhausted with Java. A lot of respect for
Mm,
Java, but I just felt If you'd asked me at that point in my career, I would have told you I could do anything in Java, but I just didn't have the strength left to do it.
Hmm.
It's kind of a high ceremony language. It can be quite tiring. And every idea you have opens a new file with boilerplate and getters and setters.
Yeah.
I'm not going to retread the criticisms of Java, but at that point in my life, I was exhausted. And I just went looking for the most different programming language I could possibly find. Just give me something new. And I accidentally happened on Lisp.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, Lisp, this looks completely weird, but that's exactly what I want. And I ended up choosing Clojure because I thought, if nothing else, I'll stay on the JVM and that will have some use to it, right?
Yeah.
And that opened my eyes more than to Lisp, to the whole world of functional programming. Right? The idea of immutability was enough to just blow my mind at that point. And programming that way, and I could not figure out how to program in a world where not everything was an object. And solving that puzzle, completely changing the way I think about software, that was fascinating to me, and it was exactly what I needed to rejuvenate my programming career.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it was a really exciting exploratory time for me. And so I thought, okay, this is probably career suicide, but this is where I want to be right now. And as it turned out, whilst there aren't that many jobs for Clojure, there seemed to be even fewer programmers for it. So it's like I was on the right side of the supply-demand curve, even though it was a tiny niche. And I got work. I got more work than I could satisfy, actually. It was good. It was a great time. And I was learning and learning.
What was that learning curve like, going from object-oriented to purely functional?
Kind of brutal, I think. Well, brutal's probably putting it too strongly, but I thought the weird thing about Lisp would be the syntax. And I got used to that really quickly. And it was actually the problem solving that was hard. That you end up thinking in a completely different way about how you solve problems. And the place I got to is the mental model is far less like little objects talking to each other and more about a pipeline where stuff comes in on one conveyor belt, gets transformed by a function and goes on to another conveyor belt to the next function. And once I got that mental model, suddenly it all started to snap into place, and I just loved building things with it.
Yeah. That's interesting. I actually worked at a shop that was purely functional for a while. It was interesting. Yeah. They definitely had the option of choosing other ways of doing stuff, but the people were very much of the opinion that if it's not functional, it's crap. So
yeah, it does tend to attract conversion moments.
Oh yeah, like one of the lead devs, he was telling me, we would not have problems in business if people just programmed in functional paradigms. Like, I don't know if you've run a business, but these aren't really the same things. But I do appreciate your conviction here. But it was really fascinating though, because I think it was in this case it was people were programming F#.
Oh, okay.
Remember that? Yeah, that was the one that they chose to use. And I know another shop around here. They did like AI drug discovery, and they are a Clojure shop.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Clojure's, I mean, as well as being a functional language, it's an enormously fun language to work with. Because their whole thing of REPL-driven development, right? You feel like you're constantly interacting with the program. And that you can compare that to Java. Let's keep picking on that if we're going to pick on something. I felt with Java, you would do a small change and then you would run your test suite and wait for that to happen. You would come back and do another change. And it was very stop and start. Whereas Clojure always felt like a conversation with my program that was gradually evolving.
That's interesting. Maybe I should rediscover that. I mean, there was a period of time several years ago. I think when I was at that company that was doing functional, I was like, I'll check out Haskell. I mean, it seems like a cool language. Maybe I can pick up this functional thing, and then I don't know. Ultimately, got distracted by a bunch of other stuff. I was supposed to be writing machine learning algorithms and not learning functional programming. So, but it definitely. I see your point though, right? It definitely like molds your brain in a much different way. Like you see the world you see programming in a much different way than you probably otherwise would. So there's no harm in that. It's cool. So,
I think it's one of the big advantages. I mean, sure, it can be great to have lots of different languages on your CV, but really the thing is to have lots of different ways of thinking in your head.
that's key. That's a really good
Yeah.
point.
So it's why I would say, if you can do a bit of logic programming too,
Hmm.
because I doubt you're ever going to get a job in that, but it does change the way you think. And then you come back to other problems with your existing tool set, and you've got more ways of thinking about how to solve it.
So, I don't know. So do you do that? Do you do with programming? Do you still like try and learn new paradigms or new methodologies or
Yeah,
practices?
the one I'm trying at the moment, which I picked up kind of via a podcast guest of mine, is a language called Gleam.
Oh, I saw your podcast episode. I didn't listen to it, but
Okay,
what is Gleam?
so it's related to Erlang. So the thing that I find interesting about Erlang is it has a completely different way of thinking about how we do reliable, fault-tolerant distributed systems. And they've got both a language and a platform for doing it that has like headline-grabbing reliability claims. I've always found that really interesting and wanted to learn more about it, but I've never liked the language Erlang.
Mm.
It's always put me off. And a friend of mine who was the guest had created a statically typed functional programming language that runs on this distributed actor-based reliability platform. And so that's currently occupying all my spare programming time. Like,
Super cool.
how can we use statically typed functional programming to build these big distributed, super reliable systems? And it's philosophically quite different to the other statically typed languages I'm used to, which would say a big part of the way you solve these problems is you use the type system to try and get things correct before you run it.
Hmm.
And Gleam does that, and at the same time accepts that sometimes things are just going to crash, and you have to have a strategy for in the field.
That's super interesting.
It's quite cool. I'm still getting my
I'm
head
looking at it
around
right
it,
now.
so
Yeah, I'm looking at it right
don't ask
now.
me to dive too deep into the how because I'm still learning. But yeah, that's what's
Did you ever
fascinating
check
at
out
the moment.
Did you ever check out Elixir?
No, I never quite did. I was too busy with the Haskell world and thought, you know
Mm.
what, I'm gonna wait because there was an attempt to port the platform called the Beam to Haskell, and I played around with
Mm.
that a lot, and it was really good. Really enjoyed it, but it kind of the project got abandoned. So
Happens.
yeah, so I've been waiting, and now Gleam is on my horizon, and looks like it's
Okay.
got legs.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll check this out. I know what you mean though, because there was a time when I was programming a ton, and I think for the last probably year, I just have had no interest in it at all
Really?
for whatever reason. I guess more I've been writing and stuff too, and more just I think pontificating about sort of the futures of like data modeling and stuff. So I've just been more nerding out on that, but I miss programming. But it's like I don't want to go back to the same stuff. Like my background's doing Python forever and other
Yeah.
languages, and just but I'm like if I could do something different, might be motivating. So
Yeah, you need things to keep it fresh. And one of the
yeah.
great things about our industry is there are always new ideas to
Oh yeah.
explore and discover. That's why I like going to conferences, because a
Mm.
good conference, you come away with this massive notebook of new things to go and look at.
There's almost
Yeah,
too many
that's
things
where I get my
sometimes, right?
inspiration. Oh yeah, always, always. My to-do list is far longer than I can get through in one lifetime,
For
but
sure. How
never
do you
running out of
choose though?
inspiration is worth it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. But how do you prioritize, and how do you pick what you're gonna focus on?
Often it's like you make a note of all the interesting things you hear, and if something
Mm.
keeps coming up in conversations with interesting people, it kind of pops it to the top of the stack, right?
Yeah.
So, so I've been thinking a lot about actor models recently and real-time data streaming and all that, and I guess between all that and Gleam coming along, being in that sort of shape of system, that's finally popped it to the top of my stack. But I
Gonna
guess you
dive
could
into
make a
Gleam now?
parallel to marketing, couldn't you? If you want people to pay attention, you've got to keep broadcasting the same message several times before it actually percolates to the top of their head.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot like that. But what I consider kind of what you're doing is more you're almost like an artist in some ways too, right? Like you're constantly reinventing whatever you did and building on top of that, but you're not playing the greatest hits all the time, right? So
Yeah, in that sense, I'll accept that. It's
yeah.
I've been very lucky that I've found, by and large, this industry allows me to pursue my interests and still pay the bills.
Mhm.
And it would have to, because I would go stir crazy doing the same thing for too long.
Right.
But it's helpfully, it's always been on a bedrock of I want to build things in computers.
Hmm.
So there's been a market for that. But there's so much to explore within that short sentence. There are worlds within worlds.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I've never run out of things to usefully look at and build.
Right. Then you could talk about them at conferences. You could talk about them on podcasts, right? And then write articles,
Yeah.
and that's the other part of it too. So
Yeah, that's the other joy of it. Not once you've like built it and learned about it, you want to go and talk to people about it and hear what they're
right.
doing. And I
Hmm.
think that's how I got into developer advocacy. It was
Yeah,
the
walk through
chance
that
to
because
spend.
that's a fine line.
Yeah, well, it's so what happened there was I'd been contracting, I think, for about 10 years actually. I'm really enjoying it, and I on the side I just started for fun to organize meetups. I used to run
Mm.
a hacking group. We just get together once a month, and I would come in with a group of puzzles that we could do. And we'd
Oh, that's
vote on
cool.
them and break into teams, and it was great fun. We just sit in a pub and you'd like have a JavaScript team and a Java team and a Haskell team and an Erlang team, all working to solve the same problem in their own way.
That's so cool.
And then we'd do show and tell, and we'd stick around drinking until the pub kicked us out. And I ran that for about 4 years before having two small children made it too hard.
Yeah.
But so things like that, I was talking at conferences, I was writing, and a friend of mine came up to me and said, "We're trying to hire a developer advocate, and I think you'd be great at it because you can spend half of your time coding and the other half talking about it." And that sounded really good because I was sort of spending half of my time talking about it and not getting paid. So yeah, that's how I got into developer advocacy, kind of by chance, but by it being what I was kind of doing anyway.
What about what year was this?
This would have been 20, 21.
Okay.
Yeah, by the time I actually started doing it professionally.
Got it.
It probably goes back to about 2017 when I started doing things of the same shape.
Right. It feels like developer advocacy is one of those um, careers that I think it's now kind of consolidating as to what it is. But you talk to Tim Berglund, for example, he's got his
Hmm.
idea of what it is. Other people have their opinions of what it is, but it's definitely kind of straddles, as far as I can tell, software engineering and marketing, right? Or technology and marketing. You're sort of the glue between those.
Yeah, I think you have to be very careful with the word marketing because it has different facets. Right?
That's true. Yep.
It's so there's a part of marketing that's just broadcasting, advertising, telling
Right.
people what you want them to hear, and I don't think it's really that. But there is a part of marketing that is, you've got to stand up to be noticed. You've got to having tried to build something valuable, you got to tell people about it because if you've actually built something valuable, then people will be glad to learn about it.
Hmm.
Right. And there's a part of marketing that's checking that you've actually built the thing people need. So that's listening to them, listening
Right.
to what their experience is of solving the problems. And there's a part of marketing that's like in technical marketing, there's a part of it that's because it's not as easy as selling a candy bar, right? You've got to help people actually use the tool before they realize how great it is.
Yeah.
This is all predicated on building a good product. But having done that, you've got to go out and just get stuck in with a developer conversation.
Yeah, I always kind of view it as kind of the bottom up marketing versus the top down. You know,
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah. So I mean, the advertising, right, is always top down, and you're shouting at people. Whereas, um, I've run meetups for Jesus, like 11, 12 years now, maybe longer actually. Because I had
Wow.
started a Ruby group way back in the day, a Rails group. Um,
Ah,
but so I've always had to deal with, not deal with, but interact with developer advocates, for example, and the marketing teams of the companies. I think it's I don't know. I always like dealing with the engineers if I can, or the developer advocates. No offense to the marketing people there, but they kind of want to insert their message into the meetup, and I'm like, it's my number one rule is like no shilling. You can come and
yeah,
talk about what you're doing, but don't. This isn't a chance to have an unpaid advertisement at my event.
yeah,
So because for me it's always about community, right? But I think the good developer advocates and the good even the solutions engineers or the software engineers who come in and talk about the product, like they do a really good job at just knowing how to speak to devs, right, in ways that the marketing comms department just simply can't do. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think for me, the ideal it's quite hard to find a good developer advocacy job because the
Mm,
ideal is that it's something you would talk about for free anyway because you're
right.
just excited by the technology. And then the job is to actually prioritize doing that above all the other things you talk about.
Mm,
And to be at particular conferences rather than just the ones that that you fancy joining. That's where it becomes a job. But yeah, I mean, I spent a couple of years talking about Kafka, and I'll still happily talk about Kafka for free. But if you want me to do it at specific times and places instead of the other projects I'm working on, then you have to pay me.
right. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting.
Equally, Haskell, we'll talk about if anyone's hiring for Haskell DevRel, let me know. Seems unlikely, but I might as well throw it out there.
uh, yeah, I'm not sure how many Haskell companies there are out there. But if you're listening or if you know somebody, hire Kris. You're amazing at it. So
See
yeah,
what
it's
I mean
interesting
about
that
finding niches and hoping it works out?
get even more niche.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, Haskell companies operating in like the fintech space or
Oh,
using
there's a surprising
Haskell.
number of those,
Oh yeah,
actually.
actually, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the one industry where I
Haskell
found that
companies
actually.
in video games. That'd be the nichest I
Mhm.
can imagine.
Oh man. Yeah, I think it's an interesting community is interesting right now, right? Like I for where I am, I'm now going or around the world speaking at events and showing up at meetups and parties and stuff, right? And that's but again to your point, that's um, it sounds like fun. It's also work, so you do have to get
Yeah.
paid. But it's interesting now because I didn't I don't know if I saw that before. We had kind of the nerd famous data celebrity showing up to an event, right? Like maybe that's been a thing for a bit, but it seems like a different angle, um, than before. So,
Yeah.
because for
Yeah.
me to show up, I tell people like I don't really, I'll kind of talk about, I'll have a general theme of what I'm talking about. I don't really shill. So,
Mm.
it's a weird, interesting spot to be in, right? So, because
Yeah, there are
but
definitely people out there who are celebrity. I'm not even sure what the word is. He's like celebrity tech people. Few
yeah,
well-known names. I don't think that's. I mean, I don't think. I think that's just normal human behavior, right? That we tend to form relationships with like parasocial relationships with people who are interesting in the field we're excited about.
yeah, it is a fascinating thing. I think it's more just to get people to show up, then you can, you know, uh, pitch your stuff on the side, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Something I've noticed where I feel like the marketing angles, right? That companies are trying to take now. They're trying to be, I think, a lot. I don't know, more outside the box, I suppose, than what they used to do. Because I think it's like every company has a dev advocate now.
Yeah.
And so it's extremely noisy. So I think what I'm noticing is there's new angles people are trying to take to just to get visibility, because I think especially with the number of tools out there right now, it's just so crowded. And like, if everyone has a dev advocate, for example, they all want to clamor to go speak at a meetup or a conference. It's like, how do you get the word out these days, right? It's hard.
It's tricky. I think, maybe I'm naive, but I think it comes back to having. I don't have tricks. I just have the basics. Is it something that's worth learning about? Can you explain it clearly? Can you build interesting things or useful things, or get rid of difficult problems with it? And if so, go out into the world and tell as many people about it as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's interesting, it's useful. If it's a useful, valuable solution, you will find the pool of people that want to hear about it. And I think what really separates DevRel from marketing on this must be a separate function thing is another part of marketing is understanding your audience and talking to them.
Yep.
And I don't think people with a traditional marketing background can even speak the same language.
Not unless you've done it.
No.
Right.
Not with any credibility. You get people who say, say JavaScript when they mean Java, and their credibility is gone instantly because they just looked up terms on Wikipedia and thought they were programmers. You can't fake it because it's such a deep field.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think that's a success of or how you run a successful meetup too is, I think, in large part about fostering that sense of legitimacy, right, in the community, like by devs for devs, for example, right. When I started my Python meetup, right, it was Pythonistas for Pythonistas, right, and we had a very hard line in terms of like sponsorships and so forth. Just we really wanted to keep the community going at all costs, and but it's a big balancing act, I think, because the temptation is, these big companies, when they want to come in and sponsor things, right, and that's where dev advocates might come in, but they have to do it in a tasteful way, for sure, because otherwise it'll ruin it overnight. Like if we had somebody who did exactly what you said, right, if that happened at say a Python meetup or a Java meetup, I mean, dear God, like where did you find this person?
Yeah.
Can you get them to leave now? Thank you. So
it's one of those things. I don't think it's that hard to be credible if you've got the background in it, but it's very easy to be found out if you don't.
Mm-hmm. Super easy.
Yeah.
I mean, developers are super sharp and don't like bullshit. It's strange enough, but
I like that. I like that about us. I think it comes quite naturally of us spending most of our time with a machine that doesn't care about your bullshit. You can't con a computer into working. It keeps you ruthlessly, brutally honest about what you're saying, because that's the only way it will work. And I think, that's a good, healthy thing. It means we've got a really strong bullshit detector because we've been trained by the best. It also means I think sometimes we can lack the social graces that are needed to go out into the real world and talk to people.
That definitely happens too.
Yeah. You can't go into a marriage the same way you go into a conversation with a computer.
Well, unless your spouse is also a programmer, then I guess
that would be a conversation I'd like to listen to.
Oh, I have friends like that. They're both. I've lots of actually quite a few couples I know are devs, and it's fascinating to see, for sure. I'm glad my wife doesn't. She works in finance. I'm really glad, so I don't have to talk about what I do. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
understand and you wouldn't care. So we'll just we'll talk about other things. And so it's a
Yeah.
good way to unplug. Yeah, because my friends who are married who are devs, I mean, they'll talk the separation between work
Mm.
and the craft of coding, for example, and just the marriage doesn't. They're inescapable. So it's like you can't turn off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'd find that quite hard, but I don't know. My wife's in she's an editor in the fiction world.
Oh no way.
So yeah, so it's a completely different world, and I think that's good. I like hearing about what she's up to, probably more than she likes hearing about what I'm up to. But there we are.
That's so fun. What kind of editor is she?
So she mostly edits people who she does a lot of work editing novels that aren't quite there. So you've written a novel, you want to get it published, but it's not being picked up, and like they have an agency that's kind of a clinic for helping you see the gap between your best and what the market demands, right?
Mm,
And so I could not do her job because that means structurally, by definition, she's spending a lot of her working hours reading books that aren't worth publishing. Um,
yeah,
and I don't know how she does it, but she's brilliant at it. She can read 200 pages of something that's barely readable and sit and get the insight as to what pieces are missing. There's
that's a
something
talent.
there's something of a programmer in her, something of a systems
I was gonna
architect,
say
but I don't think she'll ever do it.
she'd probably be pretty good at it if she did. So
Yeah, I don't think she'd ever get through the first couple of years that you need to do on the front line to get there. But she does have that way of synthesizing a huge amount of information and figuring out the missing pieces, which I respect.
interesting. Yeah, after I published, well, during the writing process for our book too, it was just working with editors. You have a lot of respect for what they do. It's a craft, right? And there's different types of editors too. Like when we wrote the book, it was you have
Mm.
a development editor who's basically somewhat of a project manager. They keep you on task, but they also kind of help you develop the story arc and kind of the structure of the book. And then when the book went to print, or right before, they had a copy editor, and I don't know who this freak of nature is, but like they took the book and copy edited the entire thing in like 2 days.
Wow.
And yeah, I don't know if it's a robot but I think it was a person.
Yeah.
Um, but the edits, I mean, every page had like lots of red lines.
That's
It was nuts. Thousands of edits.
that's
So
astonishing.
yeah, like I couldn't do that job. That'd be insane, right? But
No. And often copy editing, I think you end up reading the book on the level of commas, right? And
mhm.
punctuation. It's like, how do you do 200 pages of that without going completely snowblind?
I don't know. Yeah, because there's also like the Chicago. There's I don't know. There's certain like standards. I think Chicago is one of them, and a few others. But it's like there's editorial standards that you have to have too. Structurally, like how do you do quotes? How do you do citations and stuff? Right? These are
Oh, yeah.
um,
Let's have a fight about the
there's
Oxford comma, that kind of thing.
yeah, right. But that's the level that you're at that. I'm just
Yeah.
like, holy crap, it's insane. But more power to whoever does that kind of work. That's really cool. But there are definitely parallels, back to programming, right? Like I think it's you're trying to make sense out of something at the end of the day and give it structure and give it a finality, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think there's a lot of overlap between programming and writing. Like
oh yeah,
we talk about doing drafts, right? Draft programming like a prototype is drafting the first draft of our story of how the system should work. And then one of the things I learned from my wife is one of the differences between an amateur writer and a professional writer is how much do you rewrite? And we don't use the word rewrite, we use the word refactor. But it's the same thing. How much do you go back into the thing you've already completed and keep finessing it until it's up to the quality you need?
hmm
And one of the best books I ever read on programming that doesn't think it's about programming is Stephen King's
on
book on
writing.
writing.
That's
Yeah,
such a good book.
it's a really good book, and it's a programming book, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also didn't realize he wrote most of his books when he was like madly drunk. The entire like
Oh, I didn't take that in. Did he?
he was a raging alcoholic for years. Yeah, all of
I
his
had
best
no
books were written
idea.
when he was like trashed.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Then he one day he looked at it. I guess he looked at his garbage can that was full of beer cans, and he's like, "God, I'm an alcoholic." And he's like, "I quit. I'm done." And he kept writing. Yeah, but I was like, yeah, he got really personal in that book too. But that it's such a good book. It's one of my favorite books. It's so
Mm.
it's interesting
I should
you
reread that.
read that. It's worth
I read it years
rereading.
ago.
It's so good.
Yeah. I don't know how these artists function on this many drugs. I really don't. Like, how does Jimi Hendrix even pick up a guitar when he's high, much less play it like that? Right?
I think it's just part of the art, man. It sounds like such a cliched hippie thing to say, but it's like, it just to me, the artist and the drugs and whatever their tool is, it's all one and the same sometimes. And
Maybe.
and whatever comes out is just whatever comes out. That's how it is. And and as watching that movie Sid and Nancy, about Sid Vicious, the bass player for the Sex
Oh,
Pistols. Yeah,
yeah.
really good movie, but really sad. Because it's about like his downward spiral with his girlfriend. How he ODs. But really good movie. But I was like, as I was watching it, as telling my wife, like, I don't think that a guy like Sid Vicious, for example, right? Like he's supposed to die young. There's no way this guy makes it to like, 40 years old. Like that's just not in the cards for this guy. Like this is exactly how it should be. This guy ODs, and it's like the perfect ending for him. It's sad, but there's no other way for it to happen, right? Like that's just because it's like that's the rock star punk rock lifestyle that he was living, and like that's the art of like what he was doing, and it's tragic, but that's
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, I think of Keith Moon, the drummer from The Who,
yeah,
and that guy was going to find a way to kill himself one way or another.
mm-hmm.
Didn't
Yeah.
he die by crashing a Rolls Royce into a swimming pool and drowning?
I don't know.
I think. Don't quote me on that, but he died
It's-
some way like that, some random crazy thing.
yeah, but I think I don't look at these tales as being, they're tragic, but they're also, to me, I guess it's part of the artist, right? Like that's how it is. And so,
I
it's
think
in a
many
weird way, like
artists
their
leave a
death in
legend
itself.
in their wake.
Yeah. In the way they die too. It's just like that's
Yeah.
part of the act. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's interesting. And, but yeah, there's a lot of parallels between like, I think programming and art too. Like it was when I was in Munich last month. I was hanging out with this one of my favorite DJs. This old guy. He's like 60 years old. His name is DJ
Hmm.
Hell. He was like I think
DJ Hell.
yeah. Well, his name is Joseph Helmet or something, so he just called himself DJ Hell. But he's like
Makes sense.
he was like I think the first electronic music DJ in Germany, and I believe in Europe as well, or one of the
Right.
first. But he's like the guy who I don't know, started the whole like rave scene there and stuff. And I had the opportunity to talk to him for an hour right before his set for some reason. I don't know how this happened, but just drinking beers with this guy and like and I asked him, so the conversation was all about reinventing yourself and staying relevant as an artist because he's been DJing for 40 years. And like, that's crazy, right? Like a lot of people, you're old now, you're 60 years old and you're still DJing and still killing it as a DJ too, by the way.
Yeah.
But his whole thing was, you have to keep reinventing yourself. So don't do your greatest hits tour, right? Like you have to always do the new stuff. And kill what made you great. You have to keep doing that, So kind of like what you did with Java and moving to functional. It's kind of like that, reminded me a lot of that story for, it's a similar type of thing where that's what I meant. You remind me a lot more of an artist in that way, where you're just reinventing yourself and, trying to stay relevant to yourself, I guess, right? Not even to other people, but it's just like, how do you keep going?
Yeah, I think it's like, why are you doing it? And paying the bills is definitely somewhere on the top 10 list. But I didn't get into programming to pay the bills. I got into it because I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
And if I couldn't satisfy my curiosity, I'd go mad. Or worse, I'd get bored and die inside.
That happens, I think, to a lot of people, though.
Yeah, it does. It does, and I think we have to fight against it.
Well, and the temptation in this industry too is you can die inside, but you're still making a lot of money, right? So
Yeah.
that's the temptation is, I mean, it's not like you're a bricklayer. I mean, those guys, it's hard work and stuff, but and boring. But I kind of like doing it. But I don't think I could do it forever, right? But with
Yeah.
programming, though, even if you're programming at like some mega corporation doing the most god awful, mind numbing code, it's like you still might get paid enough to make it worth your while. And I see this all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. I think that's why some people. I think it can be dangerous in our industry to get the
Hmm.
top paid job that you can get, because then there's nowhere else to go that doesn't look just too painful to go down to. And you can do, and equally, there's no need to, because in this industry, you can do very well on 80% of your top earning potential and be
Mm.
far more fascinated by what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think that's a worthwhile trade-off, because it's not
I
like
agree.
if we take the less commercial job, we're going hungry in programming. We're very, very lucky financially.
Oh, very lucky. Even with the downturn, it's still, I see salaries and they're still substantially more than I see in other industries, right? And I think
Yeah.
the danger is too that I think as developers that are getting paid a lot of money and have pretty cushy lifestyles, it's like you get addicted to that cush lifestyle, and I think there's some sense of entitlement too, where it's like, um, it just the expectations are higher. But I think to your point, if you're willing to kind of think outside of that, right, and find something that really interests you, I mean, hell, you're a functional programming contractor in
Yeah.
Closure Script. I mean, it made it, what I imagine is a decent living at that, and
Yeah.
it can be
Yeah. I did
done.
very well out of it, actually. And I wouldn't, if I'd been looking for a career move, I would never have found that.
Walk me through that.
It's like the smart thing to do when I left my previous role as like CTO of the startup. I would have either gone full time into management as a CTO for another company, or a consultant, or just carried on plying my Java trade at some large corporation that could pay me more. That would have been the smart career move. I might have made a bit more money doing that, but I would have been bored, dead inside. And I definitely thought interest first and then find a way to make it work out as a career. For which my strategy wasn't that sophisticated, a bit like developer advocacy. Just go out and talk to people about what you find interesting and find the network, talk to people. People will talk about what you're doing. The grapevine will work for you if you get out of your bedroom and talk. I know. So that's all. I wish I had some secret sauce for making your career fascinating. But my only secret sauce is, do what interests you and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm in a similar boat, right? Like I could go get the job at the big company. I mean, they're asking, right? But
Yeah.
what I realized is like I can't do the things that got me to where I am today. If I go work there, most big companies you're going to put a muzzle on you,
Mm.
right? Or you're going to have to talk about. I also have a really hard time caring about um, most people's problems. I guess most companies' problems.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time getting excited about things that I'm not, working on myself. But if it's, I need to get excited about this new feature that's coming out for a product. I'm like, I just have such a hard time getting motivated. So if that was my
Oh,
job,
yeah.
I would have to force myself to do that. Like,
Yeah.
But
Do you know, I've always found that quite easy.
interesting.
Yeah. It's like on the times I go for a job interview, I'm trying to find out what makes their problems interesting. And I think I'm
That's a good
generally
point.
pretty good at it. Finding out where that is a genuine problem, that if we solved it, people's lives would be better. Most companies are at least trying to do that.
Right.
And if you can find it, then you find where the magic of the job is.
That's a good point.
I'll quote Mary Poppins for you. In every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. If you find the fun, snap, the job's a game.
There's a lot of truth in that, though, right?
It really is.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know, I'm a bit of a curmudgeon, so probably something I need to work on. But no, it's a good quote and a good attitude to have. Yeah, because I think you're right. It's not like there's companies out there try to intentionally do evil or be malicious, right? I mean, that are trying
Generally
to
not.
improve something. Yeah, I mean, there might be, but yeah, for the
And there
most
are
part,
some companies that don't really know what they're doing, and they can be depressing to work for. But
yeah.
mostly, people are trying to chip away at the coalface of the world, right?
Hmm.
Um, and the job, and I think this is also a thing in podcasting, which is probably why I like it. You're trying to find what makes your guest most interesting and
Hmm.
what makes their problems really fascinating. And just it's I guess it's an exercise in empathy, trying to imagine
Mm.
their world and what looks difficult and what looks possible. And I like that.
I like that too. I was thinking about this last night too, on a bike ride, and I was like, it's interesting just the different stories and the different lives you come across in podcasting, right?
Mm.
Everyone's got their story, everyone's got their thing going on, right? And it's your chance to kind of intersect with that person for an hour and kind of get into the world in ways that they probably don't get to talk about or think about that often because everyone's off doing their own thing, right? But
Yeah,
it's this interesting mind meld moment. Um,
yeah. And it also connects to something I really liked about contracting, which
mm,
was, I mean, one of the great things about contracting is you get to work in so many different kinds of company with so
yeah,
many different kinds of people. And you can almost say, that guy over there is doing really interesting stuff. I wish I could work with him.
yep,
And you probably can in the next season of things because the carousel of the job market moves so much faster in contracting.
yeah,
And that moves even faster in podcasting. You get to live vicariously and
hmm.
just for a tiny window work with the people you've always wanted to work with.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so
And I
true.
don't
Yeah, and
really think of myself as a people person, but I guess in that sense I
no, you
must be because
definitely
I love it.
are. You definitely are. Yeah. I mean, in your own
I'm a
way,
little
you may
old
not think.
geeky introvert too.
I mean, I consider myself to be that, right? If I'm not here, you know what I'm doing? I'm sitting upstairs in my reading chair, like reading books or,
Hmm.
taking notes or writing right now. Not even writing code,
Yeah.
just writing words, right? But to me, it's kind of like programming, but different. But no, I mean, I'm also like super introverted. Matt, my co-author, says I'm very extroverted, but if I don't need to go hang out with people, I usually don't. I'd rather just
Yeah.
jam out. I mean, Lord knows I got a stack of books I need to get through, and a lot of things I need to write and content that needs to be done. But it's like, but podcasts are like the one where it's like, just get a chance to talk to really interesting people.
Yeah. Peer into their world for a while.
Yeah, and they can peer into yours too, right? If you want. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting too. Like a lot of my friends are starting podcasts. And it's just like I kind of joke that the all of our phone calls are just gonna be podcasts pretty soon. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. But that will be okay because I think it's a reflection of this very human desire to communicate, right? Human beings are, above all else, they're tool makers and communication engines. Right? Our just brains are
mhm.
hardwired to solve problems and talk. And that's great. So if more people are starting podcasts, having more conversations, that seems deeply human to me. And I
Oh,
love
it
that.
definitely is. Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's cool because people can have their own takes on topics or whatever. Like I always feel like content in itself is like it's a multiplicative game. Like
Mm.
I was on your podcast. It's awesome. People can see that. Now you're on mine, and people can see that. And but they're different conversations. And
Mm.
I think that's really cool. Whereas in consulting, right, it's kind of like that's like a zero sum game. Like if you and I had competing for a deal, one of us is going to get it. But not both of
Oh,
us,
yeah, I see
right?
what you mean.
Yeah, but I always found like content, especially podcasting, is one of these things where it's again, I think it just grows.
Yeah.
everyone's profile
There's
and
no
everyone's
competition
experience.
for conversations, right?
No,
Because we
there isn't.
need an infinite number of them as
Hmm.
humans, and always will.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I always listen to stand-up comics, in various stand-up comedy podcasts, right? So,
Yeah.
and all these comics get in each other's podcasts, and it's just utterly hilarious every single time. So, yeah, it's
That's a feel I've not really listened to those kind of podcasts. I must do. Yeah, I probably enjoy that.
a really good one is "We Might Be Drunk"
We might
with
be.
Mark, yeah, with Mark Normand and Sam Worrell. So that's hilarious.
Hey.
Yeah, they're two of the best comics I think at the moment, or some of the best. Yeah, Your Mom's House is also good. That's Tom Segura and his wife, who's a comedian. So you want to talk about like the other odd couple, two programmers. Now you got two comedians who are married to each other. That's got to be
Oh,
hilarious,
that could be very tiring or very hilarious or both.
right? Like when do you shut off the
Yeah,
jokes?
yeah.
I think it just gets to the point, like again, where your life just basically becomes art in itself. Like I think you don't shut off. Maybe
Yeah. That
it's
could be
just
dangerous, but I mean, if you're the kind of person that wants an audience, which most comedians have to be, right? Yeah, I
yeah.
could see that being quite fun in itself.
Hmm.
I'll tell you a podcast I love. Again, talking a completely different field, but
Yeah.
I see in the background you've got a lot of synthesizers.
Hmm.
So one of my favorite ones is about synthesizers. It's called Why We Bleep.
Ooh, I'm gonna check that
And
out.
the host of that, I mean, he's just going into different artists' worlds and hearing about how they do what they do. And because it's electronic music, it's often quite experimental. So they have their own very much have their own process. And he just has the most wonderful voice,
That's
perfect voice
cool.
for radio. And it's just Why We Bleep is great. I love it.
I like the description too. Why We Bleep is inspired by the mysterious, unique, and amazing people behind the equipment and music that we love. It's about getting better at making music, dweebing out over music and synth technology.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Yeah, I just followed it.
yeah,
It's really
he's good.
cool.
He's really good.
Well, awesome. I know we're coming up on time here. Wonderful conversation. I feel like every time we chat, it it goes in pretty interesting directions, right? But for in a good way, obviously. So,
Yeah, this didn't go where I was expecting it to, but I very much
uh,
enjoyed myself.
well, when I was on your podcast, I don't think it went where you expected it to go either, nor
Yeah,
me.
that's
I
true.
think because I think you even said that the intro. You're like, yeah, I thought we were going to talk about something, and then it ended up being something else. But
Yeah. I remember thinking we were going to talk about Python scripts, and we really, really didn't.
no. But I think it was good. It was a good show, though. I had a lot of fun. I think you have a like you can tell when somebody's been doing podcasting for a while, right? The quality of the conversation and the questions is there, and I was like, okay, I'm in good hands no matter where this goes.
Well, it comes with having good guests, so thank you.
It does come with having good guests, right? Yeah, that's for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, but yeah, thanks. Yeah, wonderful chat. So yeah, thanks for being
Yeah.
on.
Pleasure
For
to talk to you.
anytime for people who want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
You can start with the Developer Voices podcast, which is trying to be exactly what it says on the tin, listening to the developers who are trying to make the future. I'm also on Twitter. It's Kris with a K, A Jenkins. It would be Kris with a K Jenkins, but apparently that's a Carolina linebacker. The Carolina
Oh,
linebacker, the Panthers. A guy who played
Chris
for the
Jenkins.
Panthers got all my good handles, so I had to stick my middle initial in.
Oh, you got
So
to
I'm
get the
Kris A
short form.
Jenkins everywhere.
Yeah, there's a football player and a basketball player.
Yeah, just as I thought he was going to retire and sell it to me, the basketball player came in. So I know. So it's going to be Kris A Jenkins forever now because that's the only way to get them registered.
Awesome. I'll put those in the show notes. So cool. Well, hope you have a wonderful day, Chris. So
Thank you very much. You too. I'll talk to you again
yeah.
sometime.
Hey, take care. Later.